Hello, hello. This is Dr. Ashley Parks, and I'm here to share a bit for our Research Methods course. Today, you'll notice that we'll be focusing a little bit more on general health science research methods, but again, reminding ourselves that as future health services administrators, maybe you might be a public health professional, wherever you end up, we're going to use the idea of designing research experiments. And so today I'm going to be covering chapters 5 and 10 of our open source text. And these chapters really focus on research design, designing experiments, evaluating for causation, which is something that quite often we want to be careful with. My first question for you all is, how are we doing? This course culminates in a couple, different deliverables, but the idea of being able to craft your literature review, synthesize articles is really important. So I encourage you to reach out, communicate with us as instructors if you're struggling to find reputable research and feel really connected there. But remember that we talk through content together so that we can learn and build those building blocks. But the community that we're creating is paramount. That comes first. And so us having discussions and talking through things versus focusing on an isolated piece of content is very important to me. And so just reach out as questions come up and we'll figure it out together. For chapter five talks about research design. And again, I tease that this textbook sometimes focuses really on things that are very rudimentary at times, right? Are we in fourth grade science class? Are we in eighth grade science class? And then all of a sudden, I feel like we're PhD students, right? It goes from all the way from the basics to the advanced concepts. And so realizing that research design is all about developing a comprehensive, detailed plan for how we're going to collect data and then analyze it. So we have that blueprint. But design of experiments really focuses on how we're going to collect the data. How do we go in and sample something, get enough folks to complete our survey, enough individuals to participate in our interviews? How are we going to do that? How are we going to develop a great survey instrument, a great key informant interview guide? And then what does that data collection process look like? And you notice I'm working from 3 up to 1 here. Well, what does that data collection process look like? What are we asking folks to do? Are we asking them to fill out a survey in 5 minutes online at home? Are we trying to get people in person, right? And what are the biases and challenges that come along with that? Now, today's just an introduction. The next few lectures cover chapters 6 and 7 that discuss development of survey questions and sampling processes very specifically. In chapters 9 and 12, we also have further detail about research design. So again, I tease that our textbook, it can sometimes feel like it's a little redundant, but that is by design. We are taking us, regardless of our skill level in research, and moving ourselves to a place where we can really collect meaningful data, do meaningful research, and feel like we're going to make a difference for patients and individuals in our community. So a couple quick recap slides here. Prior lectures, I focused on the idea of positivism and interpretivism. Positivism is approaches like laboratory experiments, research that is theory testing. I have an idea, I'm going to test it. Interpretive methods are theory building. I'm going to go talk to these individuals about their experience in elementary school, growing up in a community in Alaska that was very cold and they had to go to school on a different schedule. I'm going to talk to them. I don't have a theory yet, but I'm going to build a theory around how place-based learning, right, prior to online learning techniques, how did it change their experience as kids? That is interpretive. I'm building a theory. And so interpretivism is a little bit different than positivism, where we're really focusing on theory test. Now, sometimes we refer to these as positivism and post-positivism in prior lectures, right? But I want you to get used to the idea that when a lot of people say qualitative research, they really mean interpretive. They really mean the fact that it's not one set of data, numbers and statistics. We're getting into the thoughts and feelings and perspectives of people. Now, in this course, we have some assignments where I ask you to reflect on internal and external validity. And I just want to share that internal validity, which again is, are we doing the research right? Did we follow our procedures? Do we have appropriate procedures? So that hopefully we can have external validity and apply our research outward. Internal validity really focuses on examining whether the observed change in a dependent variable is indeed caused by a corresponding change in the hypothesized independent variable. Is the independent variable driving that dependent variable? And so causality, that relationship where one shifts, the other shifts, that is really important in internal validity because you may be measuring two things, but you're not really measuring them in a way that they correspond to each other. If I say I'm going to look at nutrition and I'm going to look at academic aptitude, but the only measurement I'm going to take for nutrition is calories consumed. I'm not going to look at if they've had breakfast. I'm not going to look at what they're eating. Well, I don't know how well, right? And I'm not a nutrition scientist, but you get my point. You have to make sure that you're focusing on that, trying to understand the true relationship and or difference when we're measuring these variables. And that's really important for internal validity. It has to have some face value where it just makes sense. It's logical initially. So causality, anytime we want to prove one thing causes another. And we actually do this very rarely. We quite often you'll read research papers that say don't even use the word causality. We focus on the idea of correlation, a relationship between two things, not that one drove the other. The one example that I'll often give where I feel very strong causal relationships is things like smoking and cancer. My dad passed away. I've had cancer twice now, and going through treatment again at the time of the recording of this lecture, ironically. But my dad passed away from smoking from cancer that was directly linked to smoking. And so when I think about that element, when I think about the number of studies they've done in the space, the number of people we've seen struggle, that starts to feel very much like cause effect, cause effect. But a lot of what we do is really just looking at the linkage between two variables, not necessarily proving perfect causality. So let's talk about what it means to demonstrate causality. So causality requires three unique conditions. One, we have a covariation of cause and effect, meaning if the cause happens, the effect also happens. If the cause doesn't happen, the effect does not happen. So it can't just be a contributing factor. We're talking about a direct causal relationship, a root cause. We need temporal precedence. The cause has to precede the effect. So A happens, then B happens. If B happened before A is not the cause of B, right? We have to think about temporality or the timing of this. We also have to realize that it's also about excluding other plausible alternatives. So we could say, oh, if you eat this food and then you got sick, was it about the food? Where were you at? What else did you do that day? Were you around other people who were sick? We have to look at plausible alternative explanations in our research. What else could be driving factors? So, certain research designs that are very specifically measured, we're in a laboratory, we've controlled for all the other factors, we're looking very closely at these two variables, those tend to have very strong internal validity. When we go out in the community and we ask more open-ended questions, we're doing field surveys where a lot of different variables could be involved. We haven't controlled for age or race or socioeconomic status, none of that information. Well, that our study may have weak internal validity because there could be a lot of influencing factors that we're not capturing, we're not controlling for. Now, external validity, though, is much higher when we go out and collect data in the real world, come up with a conclusion, and then want to apply that to the real world, right? Because we've already tested it, we've already gone out into the real world. So external validity, which we often also refer to as generalizability, and in some cases we call it population validity if we're applying it to a specific population, or ecological validity if we're applying it to a certain setting or context. This is when we have collected the data in a similar format to what we're going to apply it to. Maybe we worked with similar populations, or we have collected it in such a way that it could apply across many populations. But external validity, the ability to say, yeah, this isn't just about one group. These findings can be applied to a lot of different groups. It's been collected originally in a very diverse, equitable sample, right? That sets us up to have external validity. Now, some people, if we like it or not, will refer to internal and external validity as a trade-off. If I'm in a lab collecting data from just the 10 people that fit my criteria, I'm not sure that's going to work out in the real world. Alternatively, if I'm out talking to people at their workplace, hanging out, I don't know, I didn't screen them beforehand, right? Less internal validity. So the idea is that to have it apply to the real world, but also have it be very precisely measured, the research done the right way. We want both. And so there's certain studies that kind of fall in the middle of this cone of validity. For example, if we do a longitudinal field survey, where over many years, cohort or longitudinal study, we're checking in, we're recollecting the data, we're validating our findings. That has both external and internal validity, right? Because it's in the real world, but it also has some sort of validating of the generalizability of the data, right? The reliability of what we're doing. We're checking over time. For example, I participated for a while in the American College Health Survey where they send you, where they collect data of college health students and then follow up with you. Well, that data, because they're following up over time, tends to be more reliable, tends to be more consistent. And so that's important. So external versus internal validity. Again, some researchers see this as a trade-off, but that's not always the case. We can design studies to have all sorts of appropriate validity, internal and external. And so now I'm going to take you through just a couple slides that review the types of validity. We're going to start with construct validity. Construct validity is the idea that you measured your key variables appropriately. So we talked about this a little bit before, but the idea of what you want to measure. Are you measuring health? Oh my goodness, that's too big of a construct, right? Are you measuring how well someone eats? Are they eating healthy? Healthy eating, gosh, that's also a very wide construct, right? Different definitions. Are you measuring satisfaction at work? Let's do that one. I'm measuring satisfaction at work, right? I may ask different questions and have different sub variables for what makes up satisfaction at work. Gallup is an agency that's an expert at doing that. They have experts that go in and collect that kind of data. That is a construct. So how well your study captures satisfaction at work, that's construct validity. Now, if I'm asking them questions like how satisfied you are with your relationships, how much sleep you're getting, well, there's a lot of other factors that go into that other than satisfaction at work. I don't know. That has a lot of construct validity. I don't know that we're getting at that main question. And construct validity is made up of a lot of different categories you can see here. I'm not going through them today, but we do have separate lectures on bias and validity. So I just want you to be aware of the fact that the way that we tightly measure and we appropriately define these things is really important. And it's different for research constructs that are unidimensional or multiple dimensional. They have many questions that build up into that construct versus if they're just an independent research construct. So thank you for taking a moment to hear me out on that. All right, so statistical conclusion validity. This examines whether or not we did the math right, to which conclusions derived from our statistical procedures are valid. Did we use the right statistical method? Were we comparing differences in mean test scores between groups? So we did a t-test, right? If you try to do a correlation, that's not two continuous variables. It's just two groups. It's a group variable. And then the scores, that's a continuous variable. We would do a t-test, right? Whether the variables meet the assumptions of that statistical test. Are they normally distributed? Do they fit what we would expect? That is what statistical conclusion validity is about. Did you choose the right statistical test? Does your data fit that? And did you perform it appropriately? Now, we can do a lot of things to assure internal validity, to make sure we're really capturing what we say we're going to capture and we're doing our research right. Okay. We've got manipulation, elimination, inclusion, statistical control, and randomization. And I've been a little bit of a bad professor this last little bit because I keep talking about controlling for variables, and we haven't really talked very much about what that means. The idea that I measure and or eliminate outside variables. So if I want to understand something, medication effectiveness, I control for gender. I capture that in my sample and I look at the effects across gender categories separately for gender or sex, right? It's things like that. The idea that I'm not just collecting data across many diverse populations and not looking at the other variables that might apply to those groups and might influence my data. I control for or capture those. Now, how do we do some of that? So first of all, we've got manipulation. And this is where one group gets the treatment and one group doesn't. So normally we have a treatment group and a control group, right? I was reading recently about the impacts of GLP-1 medications on, I believe it was liver health. And they stopped the clinical trial because it was working so well that they didn't want someone to be in a placebo group or control group. They wanted them to get the treatment. I thought that was really interesting. I read that yesterday. Um, this joke here is control group and out of control, right? Control group just they don't get anything, right? Or they get a placebo, whereas we have our treatment group that gets something. This is one way to help us really separate out and measure our data cleanly. Now, another thing we can do is something called elimination. And I am not a fan of elimination. I'm saying that up front. You're going to see a lot of literature about, especially depending on what you do your lit reviews on, about a lack of research done for certain women's health topics, endometriosis, for example, right? I had endometriosis and I have uterine cancer. There's very little study around endometriosis. Well, why? Elimination is a technique where we only study a certain group. For example, we may only study the impact of a heart medication on men because they don't have the certain hormonal influences and cycles of women. So we eliminate women because they're complex from the study and we only focus on men. I don't love that, right? I don't, no, not a fan. But sometimes it's a lot easier to start out by focusing on a certain group and restricting the study, as it says here, to a single gender or single socioeconomic status. Just study that group, get your footing, figure out if it works in that group, and then expand. The problem with elimination is sometimes we're prioritizing certain populations over others and further perpetuating health disparities. And I don't love that again. I don't think that's appropriate. And I think that we really have to make sure we have a commitment, even if we start narrow in what we're studying, to expanding from there. Next, we have inclusion, which is better than elimination. We include those extraneous variables. So when I'm testing out the effectiveness of this GLP-1 medication, I talk to men, women, people of other genders, other gender identities. I talk to people of all socioeconomic statuses. I get data from all of them, but I also document their gender. I also document where they live, a little bit about their lived experience, maybe, so that I can include that variable. So if women have massively different outcomes from men, I have gender as a variable. I can look at that. I didn't exclude them. I included them, but I'm tracking them separately. So I still end up with that same original data set of men, but I also have everybody else. Why don't we always do this? Because it's expensive, right? It's more data to get a larger sample size across groups, right? So that's part of why, but I love it. I love including. Now, statistical control is where I've included those folks, those extraneous variables, if you will. All the socio-demographic variables are measured and used as covariates. So we run different types of statistics that allow us not only to separate out the groups and look at different trends within the groups running our basic statistics, but we can do some more sophisticated modeling where we look at not just do women have a different outcome with a GLP-1 than a man when it comes to liver health, let's say, like that study was about, but um, how does gender moderate the impact of that drug, right? And that might be special of interest for people who are, pursuing a gender transition or dealing with the idea of how is my body and how is that innately different from my hormones, right? And what is that overlap for people that are in a different situation? So, all right. Next, randomization. If I randomly assign people to different groups, that really helps with internal validity. If I just take everybody I like and I give them the medication and I put everybody I don't like in the placebo group, well, that doesn't work, right? Randomization of certain traits, so many women in each study, so many men, but we randomly assign them. That increases our likelihood of having validity. And sorry, that flipped back for a second. All right, popular research designs that use some of these approaches. So we've talked about the difference between positivist, which is those lab-based experiments primarily, or field experiments. Sometimes we're analyzing other people's data or doing case research, but it really is based around a tightly controlled set of parameters versus interpretive research where we may go out and follow a group. We may study a group like with an ethnography in their homeland, right? We may travel and spend some time with a tribe that lives on an island in the Pacific, right? Doing that kind of work is more interpretive, right? Than, oh, I'm going to sit in my lab and count cells on this, little board. Different. Experimental studies, again, tend to have more internal validity, less external validity, though, because we don't know how the medication or the intervention will play out in the real world. And so we've got a tightly controlled definition here. We're testing cause and effect relationships and hypotheses in a tightly controlled setting by separating the cause from the effect in time. Quasi-experimental is what we do a lot in public health and in health services management and health science. We take a true experimental design and I don't want to say we break a few of the rules, right? But we loosen things up to where we can do it in the community. Subjects are still engaged in the research. We still collect a lot of detailed data on them, but maybe we don't randomly assign. Maybe we don't have a control group. Maybe we just go out in the community and implement a great program. Sometimes maybe we'll have different cohorts or different groups where some people will get the nutrition education, other people will get nutrition education and counseling, right? We may separate them, but we're not withholding in a lot of cases. We're not limiting access. We're trying to do good work. And so that's a little bit different. We change the rules in order to make sure that we're doing good work in the community and it's acceptable for a community or for a health system or for our patients. Field surveys are non-experimental designs where we go out and we ask questions. We ask questions. How are you feeling? Did you get vaccinated? What is your physical activity level like, right? Capture snapshots of practices, beliefs, or situations. But again, we're not measuring those perfectly. We're asking questions. So if I put someone in a lab and I had them run on a treadmill for an hour a day and then someone else who didn't, I could tell you the health impact of running. Versus if I do a field survey and I distribute a survey and I say, hey, do you run? Well, I am an active runner, at least historically I have been. I've run many marathons. I love running. It's my favorite, physical activity related hobby. But if you ask me if I'm a long distance runner, I would say yes. But right now, I'm getting ready to go through chemotherapy again next week. I'm not a long distance runner right now. I'm hoping to get down those stairs after we finish this recording. So that's different. So what would I put on the survey when someone asks me, what kind of physical activity do you participate in? I'd probably say running because I ran 3 months ago and I'm going to run again, right? But I'm not running right now. So if you're looking at the relationship between my BMI and my exercise, that's not going to work. So field surveys have all sorts of bias. And the one I just gave you an example of, a little heartbreakingly so, right, is self-report bias, right? Am I going to be honest? If you put me in a room and I have to share details, we also that is social desirability bias, right? I'm going to say things that I think people want to hear, that I think will make me liked. That is very common with a lot of research participants. So for a moment here, I want to talk about the popular types of research that we do in health services administration, in public health when we're in the community. So these are some field survey types. We may do a cross-sectional survey where we go out and we talk with a bunch of folks. We could go out and talk with students on campus and say, hey, what is your physical activity level like? What do you like to do for fun? How healthy are you? That's cross-sectional. We just talk to them or give them an online survey or a paper survey once. Longitudinal, or also known as a cohort study, those are the same thing, follows participants over a period of time. So you may start collecting data on these folks when they're in high school and follow them their whole life, or as infants and follow them their whole life, and really understand the health impacts of certain things. That is a much longer field survey. It tends to have higher both internal and external validity, right? Because we're getting so much good data. It's getting verified over time. As far as analyzing secondary data, taking someone else's data and examining it, there are so many cool data sources that are available. A lot of data is available through the National Center for Health Statistics, or NCHS, if you Google that. C data and SAMHSA data, lots of federal agencies collect information each year. We also have development statistics, so understanding how measures of human wellness and equality and all sorts of things available through the United Nations Development Program. And we have data that's collected by other researchers that we can analyze. So that is called secondary data analysis. And so some of you, when you work through your lab assignments for this course, you may say things like, I wouldn't collect my own data. I would look at this data set that already exists online. That's just fine. Now, some of us spend time really diving into one case, one example, one situation. We call that case research. It's different than just doing an academic case study on a business or an organization. It tends to involve more detailed data collection. And we see this a lot in medicine because it's normally focused on one case. For example, if we studied the first person who ever got COVID, right? And we looked at all the medical data around that and the social situation that happened and their travel and what situation they were in. That doesn't have a lot of generalizability to everybody else. It's just one situation, right? One story. But it still has some value from an epidemiological perspective for understanding how COVID began. So another type of study, and I do a lot of these, a focus group. And you hear about these in marketing all the time, but if we get a group of people together, here it says typically 6 to 10 people in our textbook, but sometimes I do it with as little as 3 to 4 people. You get people together to discuss something for an hour or two, and you document all their thoughts and feedback, and you then qualitatively code that. You organize that data, and you do a different type of analysis, very interpretive, where you review those transcripts of that focus group. We've got action research, and this is what most of you will do your whole career, whether we call it research or not. Action research involves solving organizational problems. We've got a problem. What caused the problem? How do I fix the problem? We do that all day long. Tires flat, what happened, right? All day long. It assumes that there are a lot of different complex social phenomena that impact problems in health services and healthcare, public health settings, right? We develop initiatives around solving problems and fixing problems. A lot of this work is done in quality improvement. If you decide to pursue, and I know I push this in a lot of my courses, a Lean Six Sigma black belt or some sort of education, that is quality improvement. That is all about solving problems, and that's action research. Another good example of research is ethnography. And this is one example we're going to cover a lot more when we get to qualitative research. But this is one example of really immersing yourself in a culture, a group, studying them, and how different that is than being in a lab. This is the idea that you want to study a phenomenon, maybe a group of people, maybe a situation, and you study it within the context of its culture. You go to that island, you go to that workplace, right? Over an extended period of time. You visit, so the example I given here is visiting and living with a certain native or indigenous population and documenting their experiences in reality. Another one, and this one may seem silly, this is one I participated in almost a decade ago. Right when online learning was becoming more and more popular, I collaborated with a bunch of other instructors and we did something called a collaborative, right? Together, autoethnography, where we started writing about our lived experience of working with students online, what it was like, what the limitations are, what the blessings are, and how could we help students going forward. But it was all about within the context of online learning, how is it just so different than the classroom? So that was fun. I've got just a couple slides here on chapter 10. Chapter 10 is a recap of all the things you probably have already heard me talk about when I talk about sampling and research design from the lens of experimental research. It's the idea that we have high internal validity and causality when we can measure things in a controlled environment, controlled airflow, controlled temperature. It's the idea that it's best suited for explanatory research when we're trying to look at linkages, not when we're trying to be exploratory, not when we're trying to look at 5,000 different factors. We're testing just a few things in a controlled environment. And experimental research can be conducted in field settings. It absolutely can. So don't get distracted and think, oh my goodness, I can't go out and do experimental research in the community because Parks said that's quasi-experimental. You can. It's just really hard. How do you work with community members and control everything without losing your mind a little bit, right? Without going into those details. And so it's just tougher. Now, with treatment and control groups, we know we may have a group that's receiving some sort of medication, receiving a vaccine, an intervention, and then we'll have folks that aren't. Those folks, maybe they're a control group where they get nothing and they know they got nothing. And then maybe we have another group, a third group that's a placebo group. They know they took a pill, they don't know if it's the active one or not, right? Treatment and control groups. So this can be set up in a variety of methods, and we do have a separate lecture where I go through what some of those look like as far as different designs for treatment and control. We also have treatment manipulation. Treatment manipulation is where we have someone who receives an intervention, just like I was talking about with kind of that pharmaceutical research example earlier. They receive some sort of intervention, we manipulate or change their situation in some way. Now, in some cases, we do research design where we'll expose someone to a certain outcome and then we won't for a while. And then the group that hadn't been exposed originally is now exposed. So we can look at the effects over time. We can look at whether or not people forget or move on from whatever training or health education they received. The idea is that we want to compare the outcomes of both groups. So we measure them ahead of time, pre-test. We do something in the middle or not, right? So control group, and then we post-test. And this is very, very common, some sort of manipulation, some sort of intervention. Now, there are a ton of threats to internal validity. And as you know, we've already had some assignments around this. The idea that there are things that ruin studies. We have people who age out of our studies and then we don't have enough people participating. That's maturation, right? We also have the idea that the observed effects go away over time as people age. We have an instrumentation threat, which refers to the idea that the difference between pre-test and post-test scores may be due to the fact that we're asking the same questions twice. They already know what they need to say. Mortality threat. We have people that pass away. There's all sorts of threats. So there's an assignment in our course where I ask you to choose a few and expound on them, which is why I'm not right now. I want to hear your thoughts. But our textbook does a really good job of laying out several of them. And then I have additional presentations on bias and validity that talk about a few more. There's a lot of different types of experimental design beyond just the idea that I'm in a lab. Is that all you learned about experimental design? From quasi-experimental or beyond the field. Sometimes we have pre-test, post-test control designs where we take baseline measures, right? And we observe, we intervene for certain populations, we don't for others, and then we test them again. Sometimes we have designs where we only test at the end. We didn't gather data at the beginning, and sometimes this is due to limitations. And this is tough. We do this a lot in the community, and we have some in public health that we call retroactive pre-post. And we talk about this in evaluation courses and other settings. Retroactive pre-post is where we didn't get a chance to collect data at the beginning. Some sort of intervention or public health program, maybe a health education intervention was put in place for some community or patients. And then at the end, we ask them, how do you feel now? How do you feel about it before? But it's a retrospective pre-post. So the validity of that, are we sure that they're going to really represent where they felt originally? If you can capture that first, it's a whole lot more reliable. We also have covariance design, and this is where and we talked about this, we look very closely at outside variables and how they might intervene, how they might actually be the driving factor. So we capture other data other than the 2-3 things that we're really focusing on studying. And then we have factorial designs, and we do have a lecture on this later where we talk about the need for what we call higher group designs, where we are not just looking at 2 groups, we're looking at 6 groups with 6 different outcomes, right? With different interventions. So we will sometimes do that in order to really get at the meat of what we're trying to study. All right, well, I hope that this was really helpful for you. I love sharing and talking about these topics, so please reach out if you have any questions, and I hope you have a wonderful week.